my Kenvians, PapaKenn here, and welcome to episode 22 of Discovering Steven Universe. I greatly apologize for the delay in getting this out to you, but if you've seen the videos the last few weeks, you know what's been going on. But let's get right into Steven and the Stevens. First of all, before I get into my favorite parts, I just want to say this. Steven and the Stevens is a really kind of morbid episode. Anyway, yeah, continuing on. Starting with my favorite parts of this episode. The first of which is the Hourglass Palace. I don't know the actual name of it, obviously. They might have mentioned it in the episode. But I really did like the design of that place. I liked how they had all the different kinds of hourglasses. And I can't help but feel like maybe Steven actually did obtain the hourglass they were looking for without even realizing it, but there was no real way to tell because obviously Amethyst stole the one kind of janky looking one. But yeah, just the overall design of the place and just the trap surrounding it, whereas, you grab the wrong one or you touch the wrong one, the entire place floods with water, and then you apparently have to wait 100 years for it to be restored. I don't know, again, I just thought that was rather interesting. I do kind of wish we had gotten to see what had happened if the large hourglass had been touched first, because, again, I think that the hourglass that Steven took was the actual item they were looking for, but I guess we'll never know. But moving on, my second favorite part of this episode is that the hourglass seems to be the time-traveling item from the pilot. The design definitely looks very similar to me. The main difference being that in this episode, Steven is basically able to time travel at will. He's able to go wherever he wants to, as opposed to, I can't really remember the exact trigger for it from the pilot. Oh, it was comebacks. It's like, going back in time to deliver a comeback. So I guess to a degree that's still working with the same rules, but it's definitely been modified from the way they use it in the pilot, which, to the best of my knowledge, isn't canonical. But if I'm wrong on that, I'm sure that some of you all will let me know. But moving on from there, my third favorite part of this episode has to be the Steven and the Stevens song. And I guess I'm kind of in my favorite parts here, I'm going to kind of be intermixing like the tracks of the episode, just because, and yes, I did say tracks, because like the two songs I'm going to be mentioning were really good parts of it, and they were well done, and honestly, it kind of shows that the boy that voices Steven can sing pretty well. I mean, it's been shown in previous episodes, but this is the first time where, like, the singing from him honestly did sound somewhat professional, as opposed to, just some little boy singing, I want to see you be a giant woman, or something along those lines. I don't know. Maybe I'm sounding stupid and not making any sense, but that's my personal thoughts. And yeah, the Steven and the Stevens song I just thought was really funny. And actually, as a follow-up to that, the Steven is a meanie, or whatever, the punk/grunge song that the three other Stevens wrote when they were mad at the original Steven. I found that hilarious personally. But moving on, my fourth favorite part of this episode is that Steven, especially when it comes to him being around more than one of himself. It may have happened if there was just one duplicate, but especially with three duplicates of himself, he finds himself annoying. And that is very clear. And it shows that, the clones, because they're all technically Steven, they all can be annoyed by each other to some degree, but yeah, I found that really funny and interesting that Steven honestly he found himself annoying, like certain traits that he in and of himself finds humorous that seeing it portrayed by, although himself, by someone else, he found it annoying. So yeah, I thought, again, I know I overuse this word, but I found that really interesting. But moving on, my fifth favorite part of this episode has to be all the time-traveling chaos and mayhem. And that doesn't really even need a description. Like, once you've seen the episode, it's really bizarre how they do it. Like, they even go back to the first episode, and there's like that little flash that kind of seems like it still melds into what happened in the episode. Like, maybe that actually happened back then, but not really, obviously. Yeah, it was really weird, and I just absolutely love the way it was done. And then it, came down to the big showdown, I guess, of all the different Stevens in the Hourglass Palace. So yeah, just really love that. Which brings me to my sixth favorite part of this episode, and this is going to be probably a little bit weird, but the Morbid sand deaths. Again, that sounds weird, but I honestly found that really intriguing and interesting that they would have something so kind of morbid in there. Now, admittedly, it's not exactly like a gruesome death per se, but the fact that they included all these different screams of what is obviously pain upon the alternate timeline Stevens disappearing and fading into sand. I just thought that was a really strange direction to go. Again, it's like not something I would expect from a kid show, but obviously this show and others of its like in today's cartoons, it's like, they are willing to go to like, these dark, really unexpected areas. And again, maybe it's just me, it hits a note with me personally, but I just found that really morbid and strange for them to portray, because again, it's just like, there's one Steven that goes up, or one of the clones that goes up to the like, I guess original Steven, and it's like yelling, just like, help me, and he like yells as he fades away into sand, and it's just really creepy and kind of grotesque, again, without actually being like graphic or grotesque. It just, that's in the favorites, but at the same time, I don't entirely know how to feel about that scene. But moving on from there, my seventh and final favorite part of this episode is another track, and that is the Steven and the Crystal Gems song. Just the way that the Steven and the Stevens version is modified and brought into, just the finale. He changed, basically the way everything changed in the end. Steven got the gems to help him because he didn't have the hourglass to go back in time and make a band with himself. Yeah, I found that track to be really good. So the combination of Steven and the Stevens and Steven and the Crystal Gems, those two tracks are just really, really good, and I enjoyed them a lot. And that'll actually bring me to the quote of the episode. But first, I did have one annoyance with this episode, and it kind of has to do with the continuity of what's going on in the Hourglass Palace. Now, in the Hourglass Palace, initially, the palace starts like falling apart almost immediately, like within seconds of Steven's after Steven grabs the little hourglass, it's like the place is basically coming down around him in the background, again in the earliest part of the episode. But then when all the Stevens go back, that goes on for a couple of minutes. And in that entire time span of like what originally happened, they would have been drowned almost immediately. So I don't know if there was some sort of magic because of all of those versions of the original hourglass, like maybe holding it up, I don't know. But yeah, that was just a very... Yeah, the lack of continuity there did admittedly bother me. I wish there had been some sort of explanation, but you know, that's just one annoyance for me. The rest of the episode I honestly thought was really good, which I guess is a spoiler for what I was going to say later. Yeah, I thought the episode was really good, so let's get that over with. I found it to be a really enjoyable episode. Again, quite morbid in some ways and rather trippy, but I found it enjoyable, and it was silly, it was funny, and then it had that weird little twist at the end with all the screaming, dying Stevens. Yeah, but moving on from there, well, first of all, if you have any of your own favorites or your own dislikes / annoyances, please do leave them in the comments down below. But as I was saying earlier, the combination of the Stevens and the Steven and the Crystal Gem song brings me to my quote, or rather kind of quotes of the episode, and it's actually lyrics from that song, like the very last song at the end. The one that stood out the most to me, and it's the one I actually wrote down here. The other one I'm going to be trying to remember, do off of memory. But the main one is like the very last line of the episode, which is, "I learned to stay true to myself by watching myself die." Which again just adds to the creepy strangeness of the episode. The other quote being that when he mentions he created an alternate timeline, and the reason why that line stands out to me so much is because of the glance that Pearl gives him when he says that. Like, there's some obvious worry there. So, like, moving on from there, that actually brings me to a theory for the future of the series, and I think that alternate timeline idea might actually have some repercussions in the future. It might not happen for a long, long time, but I can't help but feel like something in that regard is going to happen. So yeah, that is all my thoughts on Steven and the Stevens. We're going to get moving on to the next episode, which is Monster Buddies. And as always, leave your thoughts in the comments down below, and I will see you all next time, Kenvians. Until then, Alonzi!